or is it not? So one of the other things I wanted to talk about a little bit more, just to try and drive the point home, is one of the concepts that's coming out of the Web 2.0 space is implicit versus explicit data sources to provide context for information. And the idea, we're focusing here on the lurker and the active participant and the ways that those folks derive value. Now, I mentioned before ranking. Now, ranking, what it is as I mentioned, it's kind of an aggregate of different ways that people use the object in the system, which comprise of implicit and explicit sources of data. So implicit is how many people use it, how many Metacard visits, how many people have emailed it to other people, and it combines that with other explicit data sources. So number of user ratings, number of related items and highlights, number of associated questions or discussion posts. And how we leverage that inside our application is that you actually make it a metaphor for people to be able to find stuff. So when you're running a search, yeah, you sort by what your search engine tells you is relevant, but you can actually also sort by collective intelligence. Tell me what people think about this particular object in the system. When you're browsing, you can sort by collective intelligence, be able to know, hey, this is something that XYZ person is putting out there, but is this something that my peers think is valuable? Now, to wrap up, I'm going to talk about a few other strategies for collective intelligence. One of the other tenets for collective intelligence is aggregating the disaggregated. And I've got a couple of points here, but we had a really interesting discussion about weblogs at our table, and the question was, well, so you have all these people who have weblogs, but how do you know whether or not they're good? The concept behind collective intelligence is that you smartly aggregate them, so you create a unified picture of a particular, from a community practice perspective, discipline or thematic area. So some of the ways that we end up doing this is recursive displays of discussion and content. This is really important because we all know, there's taxonomies that exist inside all our organizations, and those taxonomies, whereas they help us categorize and classify information, they also bury it and make it impossible to find. So strategies for aggregation are really important. Something that I call people taxonomies. It may sound really, really simple, but I think it's a lot of times people don't think about it, is that from a community perspective, communities are actually, due to their nature, they're aggregators of people in the form of membership base. And what that ends up doing is it ends up creating aggregate views of peers who have particular insights into particular areas. It's also important to have what's called another tenet of collective wisdom is independence of perspective. You want to be able to have someone who goes into the system and says, okay, this is what this other person thinks, and so this is what I think. But you also want things that has some independence to it, like the voting that we do. If we're able to unduly influence each other in a vote, then the outcome wouldn't be as good. So things like polling and blind ratings are important tools to get another measure of independence of perspective. Some of the other strategies or tenets of collective intelligence is that it's really, really important to leverage local knowledge. So some things that you do to do that is have a very open security structure. We talked about some of the issues of having things totally open like weblogs. Multiple modes of contribution. We have to recognize that there's going to be 1% that's going to do a weblog and the rest of us aren't. Right? So how can these people contribute? Well, you need multiple modes of contribution. You need to have systems where solicitation is built in, where someone goes to the application and they know that the application is asking them for what it is that they have. And you need to have multiple roles, including lower overhead roles, like mentors or badges. And we are talking about the issue of knowledge continuity. Well, one of the ways of doing knowledge continuity, I have a case study too for one of our Army implementations, is they take people who are retiring and they give them this really small section of a discussion to manage. And they say, look, this is your area of expertise. If someone asks you about this, you'll get an email. And then just respond to that. Okay? So the idea is that is that you have these multiple different roles that not only cover, as in most applications would, kind of higher level administrative privileges, but small little roles that you can actually give out to people who don't want to have 2 hours of training just to be able to answer someone's question. So that's it. So hopefully it wasn't too much, but hopefully I gave you a little bit of insight as to how strategies like collective intelligence can help us move beyond where most of our communities are, which is in this red section over here, and add an almost equivalent surface area down here on the bottom end of the curve. That's it.
Sorry, question. Go ahead.
But any suggestions or thoughts on that? That's my first question.
Yeah. Well, the basic thing is this whole trick of implicit versus explicit data sources. If you have 10 lurkers for every one contributor, what those lurkers do, if you think about it, they go to your site and they look around, and they find things that they like and they find things that they don't like. And by tracking their behavior using things like ranking, it turns into a voting system. Basically, what you have is all these people who go around indexing content for you because they're lurkers. And what they do is they show you what they like, just by the mere fact of using it. So
it doesn't add contributions or content to the system. It just ranks the stuff there.
Well, what it does is it lets your users find out what's useful and what's not. What are their peers thinking about? Because I'll give you a good story about this. In one of our implementations, there was a researcher who went out in the field, and this was an Army example. And they went out and they talked to soldiers and they said, look, when you're facing a situation, how do you find out what to do? Full 75% said, I turn to my peers. And peers means people who are at the same rank, right, doing the same job. So it's what it does is when people go to these sites, they want to know the authenticity and the value of this information. They want to know what their peers are thinking. So in a situation like that, if you have an object that is, let's say, a document, right? And let's say it's pretty long. Okay, the odds of someone reading that, let's say the odds of reading that are 50-50. If they know that all their peers are reading that and they think it's good, okay, they're going to read that. They're much more inclined to read that. So whereas they don't necessarily add, kind of traditionally the type of content that we think about, they add a whole bunch of value and perspective as to what's important in our enterprises. And then you need a whole bunch of other lower overhead ways in which someone can just click one thing, you tie in bookmarks with tagging and different other ways that you leverage people's kind of behavior that involves a lot less than filling out a form and adding a document, which we know is like so few, right? So part of the question is, how do you leverage what people are more likely to do, right? And get that, tap into that wisdom of your 95% of your user base, because everyone who goes onto your site knows something. Everyone who goes on your site knows something about contract management. I know your example, so. But each person who goes on that site has the experience of peers because they're interested in that area. So if you can tap into that and find smart ways that technology can help you unlock that, which is what Web 2.0 is teaching our company, then you can leverage that. And push it out to the people who know.
Okay, there's some exciting stuff here. Let's go to the table and buzz about it. Tables 1 through 4. And we'll see you in maybe a little less than 20 minutes because we need to wrap up. So about 15 minutes on this one.